Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the South Florida Tribune Broadcasting Network. And we are live here on the Sports Exchange, another great edition lined up. We have lots of excellent guests on hand. We'll summarize them very quickly. Alongside of me is my co-host, Louis Adio Weiss. Welcome back, Louis.
What's going on, Scott?
Lots.
Yeah, lots of football.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, a little bit of baseball for you at the end. We'll just figure this is like a baseball lineup because that's what we've got. Leading off is Ryan Skolrud. He'll be followed by Anthony Wood. The newest member to our South Florida Tribune Network broadcasting team is David Levin, who does the Jacksonville Jaguars. Former Michigan Wolverine Michael Keller will join us. Bill Winters will also be on after that. Tom Shanahan, David Knight, and Xavier McKnight is our closer. But leading it off is Mr. Ryan Skolrud, and he will talk about fantasy football, won't you, Ryan?
That is the plan. I think that's what I'm here for. So.
Oh, I would say so, but that's all right. Go ahead and fire away, then we'll add some supplementary stuff to it. How's that stuff?
All right. Well, the first thing to talk about in terms of just fantasy stuff for today is one, what an uneventful trade deadline for the most part, which that's what it tends to be. Really, I think there's so much hype around a trade deadline, teams needing to make things happen. And really nothing fantasy relevant happened today, which for the most part makes my job a little bit easier. That being said, with the Monday Night Football game last night and James Conner coming out with a sling around his shoulder, with his arm in a sling, looking like he is probably going to miss a couple weeks is my guess. They haven't said necessarily how severe it is, but because of that, Jalen Samuels should be in for a huge workload, and I think that he is going to be a solid guy to produce for you in your fantasy lineups if you can get him. As far as his ownership right now, he's only owned in 21% of Yahoo fantasy leagues. I'm not sure of his ownership percentages in other leagues. But if you look back, when he had to take over for 3 games last year, the end of 2018, he finished one game, 28 yards rushing, 64 yards receiving, and 7 catches. The next game, he had 142 yards rushing and 30 receiving yards. And the next game, 53 rushing yards. Only 11 receiving yards, but ended up getting a TD out of it as well. So he has shown he can be productive. His best work usually is done in the passing game, which having Mason Rudolph, who for the most part, though he really pushed the ball down the field against the Miami Dolphins, but again, the Miami Dolphins are a horrible defense. Really, for the most part, Mason has done a good job of dumping off passes to the tight end and to the running backs, and so I think that really helps out Jalen Samuels and will really help his fantasy value going forward for the next couple days or next couple weeks.
Okay, on Aaron Jones, you say he's a fantasy star. My beloved Candy likes that since she's a Packer person anyway. So I had to deal with Aaron Jones with my father-in-law, ran up some good numbers, but luckily I had enough horses to beat him over the weekend. So why don't you go ahead and give me what your thoughts are of Aaron Jones?
Well, for Aaron Jones, he has played absolutely phenomenally so far this week. I want to say after week 1, I saw a stat, I believe after week 1, Aaron Jones was running back 52. Since week 2, so from week 2 through week 8, he has been running back number 1 in fantasy. Even better than Christian McCaffrey. What really helped Christian McCaffrey was his huge week 1, and he's kind of stayed ahead of everyone since then. But if you take out week 1, from week 2 on, Aaron Jones has actually been the running back number 1 in fantasy football. He has been an absolute stud. He has kind of had somewhat a little bit of a rocky go of it, just because he's had a couple games where he's fumbled. They've kind of given a little more work to Jamal Williams, and that was kind of something that we were worried about. How much are they going to split time between Williams and Aaron Jones? And really, for the most part, it's been the Aaron Jones show. There's only been a couple games where Williams has gotten the work. But for the most part, LaFleur, who again, when we were talking about him last year in Tennessee, he split the load for the most part almost the entire season until the last 4 weeks between Derrick Henry and Deion Lewis, which doesn't make really any sense.
Okay.
And so when he came to Green Bay, that's what we were expecting. But he's really, for the most part, done a good job of sticking with Aaron Jones and just filling in Jamal Williams here and there. And so really going forward, Aaron Jones is a top 5.
Well, in hockey, they always call it going with the hot hand. Obviously, LaFleur and Rodgers got that figured out. You say there's a mystery of Mike Evans. Go ahead and tell me more about it.
Okay, so here's the mystery of Mike Evans. Mike Evans right now in half-point PPR is the number 5 wide receiver. That being said, he is also, along with that, he has had a game of 0 points. He has had a game of 3.8 points and a game of 8 points. What has really elevated his fantasy value or his overall point total is he this last week had 37 points in half-point PPR. He's had a week of 41 points in half-point PPR. Both those were 190-plus receiving yards, one with 3 touchdowns, one with 2 touchdowns. And then he's had a couple of games of about 16.5 points, which really, out of a wide receiver one, out of a top 10 wide receiver, you would expect no less than 10 to 15 points, even in half-point PPR, out of your top wide receiver. That being said, he has had 2 massive games and a couple of pretty good games, and then a bunch of stinkers, 3 stinkers, and then a bye week. So really, it's trying to figure out how to use Mike Evans, and can you trust him week to week in your fantasy lineups? For right now, as of this point, as long as he is starting, you really have to play him because of the potential that he has to put up big numbers. I mean, this last week he was going up against the Tennessee Titans, who for the most part have been pretty good against the pass, but not great. Let me see, pulling up right here. They've been against wide receivers. They're around 23. So they've given up the 23rd most amount of fantasy points, so pretty good compared to most of the league. So they're a top 10 in terms of defense that way, and yet they give up almost 200 passing yards or 200 receiving yards to Mike Evans. They held down Chris Godwin, and so really for those of you who are deciding, you've got Chris Godwin or you've got Mike Evans, who's going to be the hot hand? Both of them are top 5 wide receivers right now, and so really I think. The thing is, if you have either one of them, you can't sit either one. You may have to deal with the fact that, Jameis Winston is only going to target one of them most of the time.
Okay.
But,
Lewis has a question for you.
Not a problem.
So we saw that Falcons game against the Seahawks, which was actually a surprisingly pretty close game. I saw some of that game near the end, and I was kind of impressed. I know we talked last week about how Matt Schaub, we kind of thought this would be maybe his last start in the NFL, given the lingering status of Matt Ryan's leg injury. Do you think, would you suggest somebody to pick up Schaub? He did drop back 52 times and throw for 450-plus passing yards, but, could he be a sleeper pick week 9?
No. And here's why. They've actually already stated, I believe, that Matt Ryan is expected to be back week 9. Or maybe it was week 10, but I'm pretty sure
I believe they do have a bye. Yeah.
Or they're going into bye. So week 10, they're expecting Matt Ryan to be back. Here's the thing about that game. The Seahawks were up, I want to say, what was it, like 20-0 going into the half. And so at that point, really what it was is they basically played prevent defense the entire second half. There was a lot of screen passes and everything that kind of affected, that caught, for the most part, caught the Seahawks off guard because they were playing so deep. They played screen passes, allowed their linemen to get up in front to block against defensive backs. So it was really they called a lot of good plays against good coverages, but really the Seahawks had kind of taken their foot off the gas pedal a little bit. So while it's somewhat impressive that Matt Schaub put up 460 yards passing, that being said, Seattle was kind of coasting through the second half and did just enough to hold on to the win, and never really put the foot to the gas and just absolutely stomp on them. So, there's a little bit to look at in terms of the overall statistics for that game.
All right, we got about 3 minutes left to go, so I'll get to a few on one point, and the other ones will carry over to tomorrow. So, what about your thoughts about the LA Chargers firing offensive coordinator Ken Whisenhunt?
All right, so in terms of this, here's my thought. I think that for the most part, this should help everyone across the board in that offense. Whether it's Phillip Rivers, Keenan Allen, Hunter Henry's had a pretty solid few weeks since he's come back from IR. So really, I don't think it's going to help him much. But Austin Eckler and Melvin Gordon, they have not gotten the running game going whatsoever. And as part of that, they've kind of, teams know that they could stop the Chargers' run game, and so they've been able to drop back a little bit more and be able to stop up the passing game. It doesn't help that the Chargers have lost multiple injuries on the offensive line, and so I think that moving to a different offensive coordinator could very well help the offense. I would put, depending on who they actually have calling plays, which I have not seen who that is yet, depending on who they have calling plays, it could be a major uptick for Keenan Allen, or it could, be more towards the running backs. As of right now, everyone gets a boost because Ken Whisenhunt is out of there, in my opinion.
Okay, and we'll try to get to 2 points, but we'll get to this one. Running back Darius Geis, Washington Redskins. You say he'll be ready to go by week 11.
Yeah, so I talked about this in my podcast last night. It's definitely interesting to see. He's been an injury-plagued person his entire career. It was one of the major knocks on him when he was coming into the draft in 2017, and then he tears his ACL in the beginning of 2018, beginning of the season, misses the entire 2018 season, comes back, then has another injury, goes on IR for half the season. So it's one of those, if you have depth, or if you have depth issues in terms of your running backs and you're desperate and you need someone, yeah, you could pick him up to see how it works for the rest of the season. They have a somewhat easy schedule going down the stretch.
And finally, we'll let you talk about the Cardinals trading for Kenyon Drake. You got about 2 minutes to do it.
Okay, so the thing with Kenyon Drake is the reason for that is Chase Edmonds most likely is going to be out multiple weeks with a hamstring strain. I think Devin Singletary, I believe, missed 3 weeks, and then even the fourth week when he came back wasn't 100%. They really eased him into it. That's basically what they're going to have to do with Chase Edmonds. And with David Johnson being day-to-day, it was originally thought that he wouldn't even be able to play in the Thursday night game against Arizona. They need a running back other than Alfred Morris and Zach Zenner. And I think that someone that fits their scheme more is a guy like Kenyon Drake.
Okay, very good. All right, well, you and I will have a full show to do it tomorrow, so make sure we stack the deck up pretty good. So, Ryan Skolrud, glad to have you back on the Sports Exchange, and you and I will be able to talk fantasy football in more detail tomorrow as fantasy football with Scott Morganroth and Ryan Skolrud continues at around 24 hours from now. So, Ryan, give us some good stuff, okay, buddy? Thank you for being on the program.
That was great. Thanks for having me on.
You bet.
Take care, Ryan.
All right, Louis, so give me your thoughts about what Ryan had to say. Did he help you out a little bit there?
So I want to touch briefly on the Aaron Jones situation because I think it's fascinating given where the Packers are in the NFC North. I genuinely do think that, right now they're the team to beat in that division, but I would not count out. And, Aaron Jones' presence and the way that he's played really since that 4-touchdown game have been remarkable and been a big part why Rodgers has looked like the same quarterback we remember from 2-3 years ago. But I genuinely don't think, and I understand that they're 6-1 in their division right now. I'd still be, if I'm Matt LaFleur and I'm Aaron Rodgers and I'm everybody on that team, I have to keep an eye on the Minnesota Vikings because I think that Kirk Cousins looks very good those last 3 weeks, and with the way that Stephon Diggs has played the last couple of weeks, especially amid those trade rumors, and now It seems like he's not going to be moved given today's the deadline, I think they're going to be in a lot better situation. Minnesota is, but Green Bay is still the team to beat in that division. But I just genuinely don't think, and especially because it's only halfway through the season, that they can't declare themselves division champions yet. They still have to really pay attention to Minnesota, and I think Aaron Jones' presence eases that a little bit given the way he's played.
Well, yeah, the Packers have some injury issues, but there comes a point where you just have to step it up.
And it's interesting.
Jones has.
And it's interesting for him because whenever I watched him play the first couple of seasons of his career, last year and the year before, right, I thought he was a good running back, but I never really saw him as the 1A type on that team. But now it seems like that he's firmly